This is a CBS News special. I'm John Dickerson in New York. Good morning. We're covering the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump at a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania.
If you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
Everybody's screaming drop, and you can see the blood like splatter on his face, and the Secret Service just barricades him.
I heard screams, and I heard another pop, and I seen just chaos and emotion everywhere.
To carry this day in my memory for the rest of my life, like, I'll never forget this. Nobody will ever forget this.
It's hard to unhear those bullets. It's hard to unhear the screams of people who would hear some of their kids.
The FBI stands with the people of Butler County in western Pennsylvania, and our hearts go out to the victims of this heinous act.
There's no place in America for this kind of violence. It's sick. It's sick. It's one of the reasons why we have to unite this country. We cannot allow for this to be happening. We cannot be like this. We cannot condone this.
Here are the facts as we know them. It's not yet clear whether former President Trump was grazed by a bullet or shards of glass, but he was not otherwise injured. One bystander was killed. Two others were hit and are listed in critical condition at a hospital in Pittsburgh. Police said the victims were all men, but their names have not been released. The 20-year-old gunman was shot and killed by a member of the Secret Service. The rally had only just started, with the former president addressing a chart on immigration numbers when suddenly pops were heard. Some witnesses said it sounded like firecrackers. Trump's hand moved to his right ear like he'd been bitten by something. The bullet had flown so close to his head that New York Times campaign photographer Doug Mills captured it. The Secret Service agents rushed to the stage, covering Trump like a jacket, pushing him to the ground. As he was being led away from the stage, a defiant Trump raised his fist into the air to cheers of the crowd. This morning, Trump posted on his social media account, "God alone who prevented the unthinkable from happening," and said, "It is more important than ever we stand united and show our true character as Americans." One question that is already being asked is, how did the gunman get so close to the former president? He positioned himself on top of a building about 200 to 300 feet from the stage, and with a clear shot. President Biden returned to the White House last night and spoke with Trump by phone. He condemned the attack, saying there's no place in America for this kind of violence. It's sick. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane was at Trump's rally in Pennsylvania and heard the gunshots ring out. Scott, good morning.
John, a monumental, staggering failure. It should have been a uniquely safe event. Former president wounded, one of his rally goers killed, others injured, and all of this with untold damage to the fiber and fabric of our country.
And you know, that's a little bit old, that chart. That chart's a couple of months old.
Minutes into a rally for the presumptive Republican presidential nominee, shots rang out. Donald Trump could be seen grabbing the side of his head before being swarmed by Secret Service. Erin Autenreith was in the front row.
When he turned to the right, I could see the blood from the top of the ear to the bottom.
It's not yet clear whether Trump was hit by a bullet or glass, but blood could be seen across the side of his face as Secret Service agents ushered him off stage. Trump said in a social media post he was injured when a bullet pierced the upper part of his right ear. New York Times photographer Doug Mills captured the moment the bullet flew past Trump's head. He could be seen raising a fist in the air as Secret Service agents escorted him to a nearby motorcade.
He started shooting. Bow, 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 bow. About 4 to 5 shots rang out.
New video from TMZ shows the gunman firing at the former president before being shot and killed by a Secret Service sniper. The FBI has identified the shooter as 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks of nearby Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, seen here accepting his high school diploma in 2022. A motive for the shooting is still unknown.
Right now, we're tracking down all leads and doing all interviews and tracking anything that we can regarding suspicious locations, vehicles, locations, interviewing individuals. So it's all related to this event.
Law enforcement sources tell CBS News crooks fired an AR-style rifle from the top of a shed about 200 to 300 feet away from where Trump was speaking. At least one spectator was killed, and 2 others were injured.
Somebody over there was screaming, he's been shot, he's been shot. So I made my way over. I said, I'm an emergency department physician. Let me help you. The guy had spun around, was jammed between the benches. He had a headshot here. There was lots of blood, and he had brain matter.
Witnesses said they spotted the gunman and even pointed him out to security before he started shooting.
I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, why is Trump still speaking? Why have they not pulled him off the stage? I'm standing there pointing at him for 2-3 minutes. Secret Service is looking at us from the top of the barn. I'm pointing at that roof, just standing there like this. And next thing you know, 5 shots ring out.
Law enforcement defended their security preparations at a press conference late Saturday.
In their defense, what I would want to say is it is incredibly difficult to have a venue open to the public and to secure that against any possible threat, against a very determined attacker.
Mr. President, what did you say to Trump?
President Biden returned to the White House overnight, and aides for both men said they spoke on the phone.
There's no place in America for this kind of violence. It's sick. It's sick. It's one of the reasons why we have to unite this country. We cannot allow for this to be happening. We cannot be like this. We cannot condone this.
This was expected to be Trump's final stump speech before the Republican National Convention begins Monday in Milwaukee. Minutes before he walked on stage, multiple sources said Trump was poised to potentially announce his pick for vice president, and that in recent days he'd met with Florida Senator Marco Rubio, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, and Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, who updated reporters on the former president's condition.
I've heard he's doing okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank you.
John, in his social media post, the former president says his prayers are going to those who were wounded on those rafters behind him.
Scott, you were there. Tell us about where this rally was taking place, what it felt like. This is, regular old politics, retail politics done on a weekend. It is often a joyous and an atmosphere of celebration and delight.
Yeah, Butler County is one county north of Pittsburgh. It's a heavy Trump political county. This is in one of the more rural stretches of Butler County. It was at a farm event center, the type of place you go to see a farm show. I saw so many families there, so many children there. And when the shots rang out, John, those of us who were on those elevated press rafters with the cameras had the luxury of jumping down and sheltering beneath the rafters. We had a place to hide. But in that crowd, standing room only, shoulder to shoulder, people had nowhere to hide. They could try to get on the ground. They could try. And what I can't unhear are the screams of some of those children, the parents of those children, people colliding with each other with nowhere to go as shots rang out of what was supposed to be the safest place around.
Scott, thank you. Joining us now is Aaron Ottenreith, who was at the rally and was an eyewitness to the attack. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us your experience.
I was I had volunteered and arrived 7 o'clock in the morning. So the volunteers normally, and I checked in the medium. So I got first row seats I was directly in front of President Trump. I would say I was 15 to 20 feet away from him. And I heard the pops. There was 4, it sounded pop, 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 like fireworks. And I'm thinking somebody in the neighborhood is having a party and they're shooting off fireworks. Then Trump crouched a little bit, but the 4th Secret Service jumped on the stage, pushed him down to the ground, and then pushed all the reporters down that were down on the ground, too. There was like a pile of 5 of them. And then we just didn't know what happened. Then the guys with the black long guns came on the stage and said, okay, clear right, clear left, lift him. They lifted him up. They lifted him up straight. I saw his face. I knew he was okay because his face wasn't graven, or I saw blood on the right cheek. And Trump said, I have to get my shoes on. So they must have fallen off when they pushed him to the ground. Then he turned to the right to exit down the steps. That's when I saw the blood on the ear. It wasn't gushing, but the picture that they're showing now, he was like 5 more steps closer to those steps. That's when there's more blood. Immediately, there wasn't that much blood, and I was thinking he got hurt by being pushed to the ground. Then they whisked him off in the black sedan. Then a couple minutes later, none of us really thought there was a shooting until I saw a gentleman who had spoken earlier at the rally who came behind our row, and I saw the blood on his shirt. His name was Rico Elmore. He was near somebody that was shot, and they were exiting. That was the first time we realized. But the amazing thing was not one of us ran, crouched, did anything. We all were only concerned about the president.
Aaron, afterwards, after this drama that you just so accurately described, how have you been thinking about it? Did you talk with other people who were there at the rally with you? What did you make of this moment that you were witness to?
Well, there was a lot of talk because I didn't leave right away. You know, I stayed, I had some water because I came alone. I mean, this was a very safe place. And my car was only the fourth one in the parking lot, so I knew I wasn't going to get out anytime soon. I had seen on people's phones, like, pictures of the shooter. Somebody saw him on the ground, dead. I mean, people had all their stuff on their phones. It was amazing. I was just in the front right in the beginning, staring at everybody coming onto the stage, looking to see if there was any family. The gentleman that came on the stage before Trump was Dan Scavino. I knew he was the only one there. And McCormick was supposed to speak because Trump said we have, McCormick in the audience. Should we bring him up now or bring him up later? I mean, he could have been up on the stage there. And he said, no, we'll bring him up later. And then that's when he put the graphic up about the border crossings. Now, it was to the right or the left. So he was pointing, I guess his head was turned, and that's how the bullet missed him. I mean, it was just, of course, things are so fast and you don't hardly process it at one time. But, I mean, there was no fear for my life or anybody else's. It was just concern. I just wanted him to get up off the ground, to see him, and he actually stood up on his own accord, I have to say, Aaron, and walked down those steps.
And Aaron,
I'm sorry.
Quickly before I let you go, would you attend another political rally like that again in the future?
Yes, but I'm sure there'll be bulletproof glass around him. I say from now on, I would. That was my 6th rally, so I had been there many times before. So I kind of knew. I knew he was coming when the sharpshooters got on the building behind him, but they were facing that way where the shots came from. There was 2 of them, and we saw them. It's always like I said, okay, now the motorcade is arriving because they're up there and they're in position.
Aaron Henry, thank you so much for your story, and we're glad you're safe.
Thanks, John. Bye.
There are big questions this morning about how a gunman was able to get a clear line of sight at the former president yesterday. The gunman was on the roof of a building several hundred feet from the lectern where Trump was speaking. Joining us now to talk about security at the rally is former Deputy Director of the Secret Service and CBS News consultant A.T. Smith. A.T., thank you so much for joining us. What's the first set of questions that come right to your mind about the set of facts as you know them?
Well, I think obviously with the FBI now leading this investigation, there will be quite an extraordinary amount of time involved in this. They will have some answers really quickly, but they're going to have to take this step by step, evaluate everything that the advance team and the Secret Service agents on the ground did to see just what went wrong. As you can see, the agents who surrounded the president immediately reacted in the way that they're trained to react day in, day out. You saw the deployment of the counter-assault team, which they then cover those agents who are protecting the former president. And then you saw after a short period of time, they were able to take him to the armored limousine. The reason they waited and put him on the ground was to make sure the injuries were not more significant than it has turned out to be. And so medically, they want to make sure that they're not going to cause further injury by moving him too quickly. In terms of the assailant, if you think of security and the plan that goes into an outdoor event, there's 3 concentric rings of security: an outer perimeter, a middle perimeter, and an inner perimeter. Outside of that farther outer perimeter is what the counter sniper team is for, and those are the folks that you saw on top of the building who ultimately kill the assailant. Their job is to survey that area beyond the secure area, if you will, up to 1,000 yards. So there will have to be some questions asked about that. They did react very quickly, and then obviously the assailant was taken out, but not quick enough to prevent this incident.
AT, let me focus on this idea that there may have been some bystanders who saw the shooter on a roof, tried to relay word. What is the posture that sniper team or anyone else in the Secret Service is supposed to take when they get those kinds of reports? I mean, you could imagine them being a distraction. You could also imagine them being just the kind of information they need. How would they have processed that kind of information if we accept as true, and we have to say this, that those reports were in fact relayed to the authorities?
Well, if they were, obviously it takes a few seconds for people to respond. If they reported something to the local police or an agent at one of the posts that he may have been on, obviously there'd be radio traffic to try to pin that down, locate the individual, and go to him and see what they needed to do. There has been some reporting, and I heard that this individual may have been on the outside of the perimeter well before the event started, and that someone reported to the local police that he was acting suspicious. I don't have any more information beyond that, other than there might have been a report, and that the local police may have been trying to locate him, up until the point of this happening.
Very briefly, AT, at the end here, if there's one question you would want answered at the hearings that are certainly going to be on this, what would that one question be?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
If there was one question you want answered at the hearings that are surely to follow this, what would that one question you'd want answered be?
Well, I think the biggest question right now is how did he get there, and how did he get there with that firearm? Why was the advance not out into that distance, if you will? And I think the question to be asked will be, was the view of the counter sniper officers obstructed in some way? Was there a delay in the reporting? I mean, the bigger question seems to be that right now, simply because that's where the shot came from.
A.T. Smith, thank you so much for your expertise. Let's bring in CBS News Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent Robert Costa with the latest from the Trump campaign. Bob, good morning. What are you hearing? What's the latest from your sources?
Good morning, John. There continues to be a sense of shock inside of former President Donald Trump's inner circle, but it is notable that as of this morning, the Republican Party, the Trump campaign, carrying on with their plans for the convention. CBS News has just obtained a memo from top Trump campaign advisors that say they are now calling for what they are calling an expanded armed security presence at the convention in Milwaukee, set to begin tomorrow on Monday with 24/7 officers on site. They're also making additional security assessments. The Trump campaign also advising some of its employees to stay away from its offices as they continue to evaluate the situation. This is a fluid moment politically as well. Former President Trump about to name his running mate in the coming day or so at the convention. There are still plans to do that. This is a person behind the scenes, I'm told, who is telling his advisors, push forward, we're having the convention.
All right, Robert Costa with the latest from the Trump campaign there. Thank you so much, Bob. Next, we'll head to Milwaukee, where CBS Mornings co-host Tony DeCopel has more reaction from people arriving for the Republican National Convention. The attempted assassination of former President Trump came 2 days before the scheduled start of the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, where he's expected to accept his party's nomination for the 2024 presidential election. Tony DeCopel joins us from the convention arena with the reaction there. Tony, good morning.
John, good morning to you. Everything this morning looks exactly the same, but feels very different. And we witnessed that change live right in front of us at the airport here in Milwaukee yesterday as delegates and attendees landed and then learned the news.
Of all things, a jazz band greeted Republicans arriving into Milwaukee.
Finally got our bags.
Oh, here, let me help you. And the mood was jubilant.
Hey! Are you in town for the convention?
I am. Everyone who stopped to chat was feeling excited.
I'm going to be celebrating with the greatest president since Ronald Reagan.
We are Trump people all the way, and he's going to be back in the White House.
But then...
Take a look at what happened.
What do you think about what just happened in Pennsylvania?
I literally just learned about it.
A whole different reality set in.
Sad state, when people can't have civil discourse.
Anybody that's is involved enough to be a part of the RNC that's here, you're going to get them pretty emotional, and pretty worked up, and you don't want to mess with that crowd. So
What's going through your mind there at the end?
you just don't do that in America.
And soon we heard expressions of anger.
How do you feel about what happened?
Well, I'm a delegate. I'm very upset. And just talking to my wife, she's very upset.
Right now it's changed.
Yes. Everything has changed.
Game on, honey. Yes.
But above all, resolve.
This is not cool that Donald Trump just got shot. And these people I'm with, the people that were on this plane, we're here to support that man. And we just got stronger in our determination to do it. I have never been so motivated in my life to back that man.
How does this change what happens here in Milwaukee?
Nothing. He's our candidate. He's going to be our president. And unfortunately, I think it makes it even more likely.
And barely an hour after the assassination attempt, confrontations as well.
It's a shame that my vote counts the same as your vote.
It's a shame that you aren't in the same reality that we are.
And worries it might only get worse.
Where are we going this week?
I don't think it changes anything. I mean, we're so polarized that, we're not coming together anytime soon, maybe ever again.
What will happen, we're told by both the RNC and the Trump campaign, is that the convention will proceed as planned on the stage behind me. But while that may be true in terms of timing and sequence, the feeling here when it comes to that, very little, John, is the same.
Tony, in the conversations you had, any other last thoughts? And let me add one other question to that, which is, did anybody say, we got to reach out a hand, or was there a reaction that surprised you in terms of trying to lower the boil? Everybody named precisely this moment we're in. Did anyone say, here's what we need to do to lower the temperature?
Not in that raw, immediate aftermath. And I'll tell you in more specificity about how things have changed in terms of the feeling here. Right outside of our workspace, there is a very large, I'm talking 30, 40-foot quote from former President Donald Trump. It says, "They're not after me, they're after you. I'm just standing in the way." That's the kind of rhetoric we're all going to be analyzing in the days ahead about how we got here and how those words now hit differently this morning.
Tony, thank you so much. Dr. Jim Sweetland, an ER physician, was at the scene of last night's rally. When he witnessed the shooting, he said he administered aid to a spectator who was gravely hurt. Dr. Sweetland, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Doctor, can you just relay your experience of what what happened to you, and have you ever been in a live kind of situation like this? Obviously in the ER, but I mean out in the field with this kind of thing happening.
To answer first the second question first, I've never been in a live shooting arena before. I've had no combat experience. I was on the left bandstand as you're facing Donald Trump on the stage. I was underneath the Jumbotron, and he was showing the graphic about immigration. And we were turned to look at it, my friend and I, Gary Shelley, and I heard three pops, actually, pop, 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 then a pause, and then four others, pop, 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 pop. I turned to see the president entirely covered by Secret Service, and to my right, down in the same bandstand, was a woman shouting out, "He's been shot. He's down." And I turned my attention to her. Other individuals in the bandstand were sheltering, and I made my way over to that individual and administered CPR. And as you might guess, when I first arrived, I said, "I'm a doctor," and nobody believed me. And then I said, "I'm an ER physician. Could you help me get this man up on the bench?" He had been shot in the head, body had twisted as he fell. Everybody in the bandstand was standing at that time, so I assumed he was. Two individuals that were in shock themselves looked at me and got up and helped me get him back on a bench so I could administer CPR. Unfortunately, the man had a gunshot wound just above his ear, had no pulse and no respirations. And so I started to administer CPR to him, as well as giving him rescue breathing. And I did so for about 2 minutes. And then I was tapped on the shoulder, and two of the biggest Pennsylvania State Police officers I've ever seen were behind me, and they said, "We'll take him." And they picked him up, unfortunately, like a rag doll, and took him from the stands. I looked up to see his family, who had witnessed my efforts at resuscitation, and the look on their faces said it all. My heart goes out to that family. My prayers go out with them. I'm sorry, I was in shock yesterday. The gravity of that situation is hitting me right now.
Well, of course, and we thank you for helping us understand the situation and your reaction to it and what you went through. Doctor, you see this kind of thing all the time, I would imagine, in your day job. But this was clearly something different. Your training kicked in, but tell us about how this differs from what you have to do every day, which is deal with life and death as you face it in the ER.
The difference was I was a first responder in that moment. And a shout out to all the MS that go out in the field and perform that duty every day and then bring them into me stabilized in the emergency department. This was raw. There was blood. There was brain matter around this man. And he needed immediate help. That's the difference. And I can't say enough about the people that were there willing to help somebody else, another American who was shot. And certainly that was a young gentleman. I think he was in his 30s. I think he was there with his wife and his child. And I think he was just there to enjoy a beautiful sunny day and be there to enjoy this rally. This was the first Trump rally I've ever been to. And I'm so happy that there were people there that helped. Yeah. If I can comment, later on I was walking and I was a bit in shock, and there's a video of me with blood on my face and blood on my shirt. And as I'm walking along, I get interviewed. Just after that interview, there was an Army combat veteran just off the screen. And he came up to me immediately afterwards and leaned into me and said, "Brother, you got blood on your face. Here's the water." I washed it off. Then I handed him the bottle back, and he said to me, he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Brother, are you okay?" That's what it's all about for me, for America, speaking out and helping others that are in need. As much as I helped that gentleman, that Army vet helped me.
Dr. Jim Sweetland, thank you so much for your actions and for being with us this morning. We really appreciate it. Up next, the latest on the investigation. We'll hear from the Butler County District Attorney in Pennsylvania. We'll be right back.
I'm at the Trump rally and somebody just started shooting.
We saw President Trump go to the ground, and then everybody started hitting the ground because it was chaos.
People were just on top of each other. Like, she was getting buried, jumped on top of her. And so it was crazy.
I'm not shocked that this happened. I'm shocked that I was sitting there and it happened next to me. It's just horrible.
This evening we had what we're calling an assassination attempt against our former president, Donald Trump.
Welcome back. Our continuing special coverage of the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland was at Trump's rally in Pennsylvania and was an eyewitness to the day's events. Scott heard the pop of the gunshots and saw the blood of Trump's ear and face as he was led away from the scene. Scott, good morning again.
John, sadly, too many Americans already knew what we learned last night, that gunshots don't always sound like they do in the movies. A lot of us conflated it at first with fireworks or firecrackers, but when we saw the president go down, We knew this was something much more sinister. It was a dizzying, chaotic set of events here in Butler County, Pennsylvania, just north of Pittsburgh, here in the west side of Pennsylvania. The shots rang out about 5 or 6 minutes into the former president's rally at a farm field here. We could see the former president go down before he was swarmed by Secret Service. It's not clear yet whether he was hit by a bullet or by glass, but he posted on social media it was a bullet that pierced the upper part of his right ear. He could be seen raising a fist in the air soon after as the Secret Service agents escorted him safely away. The FBI has identified the shooter as 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks of Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, about an hour away, but a motive for the shooting is still unknown. New video from TMZ shows the gunman firing at the former president before he was shot and killed by a sniper. And law enforcement sources tell CBS News Crooks fired an AR-style rifle from the top of a shed that was about 200 feet away. Witnesses said they spotted that gunman, even pointed him out to security before he began shooting. This was expected to be Trump's final stump speech before tomorrow's RNC, Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. We are still trying to learn the identities, John, of those who were wounded and the person who was killed up on the rafters behind Donald Trump. Just spoke to the local DA here who says he believes the man who was killed was in fact a man. Still trying to get more information about those who were critically wounded. There were also, John, so many people with nickel and dime injuries, getting knocked to the ground, bumps on the head, twisted ankles, and a crowd that was shoulder to shoulder, jam-packed from the beginning of the day till they were escorted out soon after the shooting.
Scott McFarland, thank you very much, Scott. Earlier, Scott spoke about the investigation with Butler County District Attorney Richard Goldinger.
So the latest I have is we have the one spectator deceased, unfortunately. We have 2 other spectators who are seriously injured. I don't have an update on their condition. And obviously the shooter is dead also.
Do we know gender or any information about those who were hit?
It is my understanding that there is one female that is injured. I do not know the gender of the second individual, and the deceased spectator is a male.
You know the event space well. When you heard they were going to have a Trump rally at that space, did you think to yourself, there's some vulnerabilities here that I hope they account for?
I really didn't. I mean, when I heard it, I was a little surprised that they were going to hold it there. We have other areas in the county that they could have done it, but...
Why'd it surprise you?
Number one, the roads in and out. They're 2-lane roads in and out. So getting in and out of it, I remember how it was when he came to the airport in 2020. It was a nightmare getting in and out. Now you only have 2-lane roads getting in and out of this venue. And I thought, that's going to be a real pain for them. The other thing was, there were bigger areas to go because Butler County is, they're Trump supporters, honestly. And the amount of people that would have been there, they could have probably accommodated them somewhere else. But I didn't really have an issue with it otherwise. It's a nice venue.
You've likely been briefed on how your local emergency responders responded, how everybody else here reacted. What have you heard about what went into responding to all this?
Well, they responded great. The law enforcement was great. The people on the ground, they handled it the way they should have. How often does this really happen? And the way they stepped up and took control immediately, I applaud the police, Secret Service, everybody that was there. They did a great job.
Serving as a county official for 16 years, you reflect on the fact that Butler County is now synonymous with something quite awful?
Yes, somewhat embarrassing, honestly, but at the same time, you can't predict human behavior. So, I got a text this morning from a friend of mine, and now everybody's going to know where Butler County is and what Butler County, what happened there, and it's unfortunate, but things were handled well.
When you know a large percentage of the population here, what does it mean to this community that this happened here?
I think that knowing how people support Trump so much here, they're going to be upset that this happened to him in Butler County, but I also think that they're going to stand up and they're going to be, hey, he made it through. It's unfortunate it happened. It's sad. It's embarrassing. But they're still going to vote for him.
Investigators from multiple law enforcement agencies are focusing on a home in Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, just south of Pittsburgh. It is where the suspected 20-year-old shooter lived. Investigative reporter and anchor Megan Schiller of CBS Pittsburgh is here. Good morning.
Good morning. This is about as close as we can get here in Bethel Park this morning to that gunman's home. If I step out of the way, look at all the law enforcement that is gathered down the street at the stop sign. If you hang a right, the gunman's home is right there, a few houses up. They have all of the roads blocked surrounding the home of the 20-year-old shooter right now. Secret Service and the FBI zeroed in on the home last night and are conducting an investigation into his background, speaking with his family and other contacts. Now, we were here as law enforcement swarmed the neighborhood about an hour south of Butler, where the rally occurred yesterday. I talked with one resident in the area who said that she heard a knock on the door in the middle of the night. She was told that she needed to evacuate and she would not be able to return to her home until noon today. When they came and knocked on your door and told you to leave the house, what did you know at that time? Anything?
Nothing. It was a state of emergency. That was it. And then I started hearing rumors shortly after about there being a bomb, which was just confirmed when I went to the Bethel Park Police Station and asked them what the hell was going on.
What did they tell you?
They said there's a bomb in the house, and that's why we can't get there. And they said the earliest that we can look at getting in our house is going to be noon.
So the Bethel Park Police...
Two officers from Bethel Park Police confirmed that there was a bomb in the house.
And now whether or not there was actually a bomb inside the shooter's home, still not confirmed. But we were told by Bethel Park Police that they were investigating a potential bomb threat around the gunman's home. Now, we want to show you video here of the shooter where he appears to be graduating and accepting his diploma on stage from Bethel Park High School in 2022. He was a registered Republican who previously made a small donation to a Democratic-aligned group, $15 donation at that. At this time, there are no links to any foreign terrorism. The shooter is not well known to law enforcement here in this area of Pittsburgh, and so far, no motive released by the FBI. John?
Megan Schiller, thank you so much for that. We want to turn now to Samantha Vinograd, a former Homeland Security official and a CBS News contributor. Sam, thank you for joining us. Okay, let's start with just the same question I asked AT. What are the list of questions on your notepad of what you would want answered based on the facts as you know them right now?
Well, John, I think there are really two lines of effort underway. The first is the investigation into the perpetrator himself. In a press conference last night, law enforcement did not rule out the fact that this individual did not act alone. So I am keen to hear whether law enforcement believes that this threat has been totally neutralized and that there are not other co-conspirators. At the same time, there's also a need to have an independent investigation into the intelligence and operational failures that led to this moment. If this individual was not known to law enforcement, investigators are likely still looking into whether he made concerning statements to his family and others, and if that was or was not known to law enforcement and why, and what security protocols the U.S. Secret Service had in place, what led to their determination on the extent of the secure perimeter, and again, what their command and control structure was on the ground at the rally to communicate information about tips and to send law enforcement to investigate them on the ground as soon as possible.
In terms of rallies or events like this, and we have two conventions this summer, but over the last few years, give us your sense of how Homeland Security officials, Secret Service officials have had to change the way they cover these kinds of events. How much further out the perimeter has to be, how much more seriously they have to take threats because they are more numerous, but also that they can lead to this. Just give us a sense of the pre-existing condition with respect to political violence before this event ever happened.
Before this event ever happened, we were at an unprecedented high when it comes to political violence in this country against candidates and officials from both sides of the aisle. One important note of context, though, John, which is the U.S. Secret Service does not pick the sites at which candidates rally or where conventions are held. all that they can do under the best of circumstances is protect that site to the best of their ability. So we don't know if the U.S. Secret Service, in this case, in a large open-air field, warned that the site was not wholly protected. As it pertains to the Republican National Convention, based upon the threat environment, based upon the very public reality that the world now knows that long-range weapons were able to strike a man who was perhaps viewed as impenetrable because of his security detail, they will likely now extend the security perimeter out. But John, last point, I will say that resources to protect the president and former president were already at an unprecedented high based upon the fraught threat environment that we just discussed.
Samantha Vinograd, thank you so much. Up next, the weight of words and dangerous rhetoric in this heated political season. Our special coverage of the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump continues now with some historical perspective. We're joined by presidential historian Douglas Brinkley. Douglas, good morning. Let's just give me the first historical moments that you went to, either to say here's a parallel or this is why this moment is different.
Well, immediately when I saw the photograph of the blood on the face of Donald Trump, I realized that that was going to live eternally, that was a very rare photo that'll be in history books that will be seen over and over again. But my mind also jumped to Milwaukee. I think Butler County, Pennsylvania and Milwaukee are going to be tied to the hip in history. And in Milwaukee is where in 1912, Theodore Roosevelt, as the Bull Moose Party for candidate, got shot and continued speaking while he was bleeding. Trump, as a modern-day bull moose, will be going into the arena in Milwaukee, and his MAGA fans, Republicans, are going to give him an ovation that we can't really even imagine yet. This public reunion with Melania, and the cheers of freedom, and for more years, and whatever it's going to be, it's going to be quite a spectacle. So this imagery that's going to stick with us for a long time as we try to unravel what occurred. I mean, why did this 20-year-old shoot at Trump?
And we also, looking back at previous attacks on either candidates or presidents, we have the categories that are political, and then you have what happened with former President Reagan, John Hinckley, which really had no political valence. It was his own personal demons. When you think back to the attempt on George Wallace, the two attempts on Ford, RFK, there was a period there in the late 60s and into the 70s that was a cauldron that led to people to take action violently in some political contexts. People have talked about the rise in political threats and violence on both sides today. Do you see any parallels there or a way out of this in some of the responses that might have happened historically to previous acts of political violence?
Well, I just wrote an essay for Vanity Fair about Grant Park in 1968, where all the riots occurred in Chicago, and everybody was being beaten, and Mayor Daley's police. And since then, we're having the DNC there this August. There is better law enforcement. There is tighter security. FBI does a better job. However, we're seeing massive security breaches. January 6th at the Capitol being one that lives in eternity also. And now seeing a rally in a field, and how in the world did a gunman get to go on top of that building like that and fire that many rounds? So it's going to mean that we have to have amped up security. There's going to be much more surveillance. There might have to be metal detectors, first machining, everything imaginable, because we might be in a season of political violence. We hope not. So we got to truncate this, cut it off right at this being a one-offer. But that worry is there, and it also brings conspiracy theories to light that people are going to be arguing back and forth on social media.
Absolutely. Douglas Brinkley, thank you so much for being with us. President Biden strongly denounced the attack on the former president, saying, quote, "We cannot be like this." Let's bring in CBS News Chief Washington Correspondent Major Garrett and CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys Anthony Salvanto to talk about this year's campaign and this moment in it. Major, I'll start with you. We've all covered the heated rhetoric and politics. So Where do you take this moment right now and this violent episode in the history of what you've covered for so long in politics, but most particularly in the era of Donald Trump?
So, John, we don't know the motive, and that's the most important thing to establish. And until the motive is clear, there's going to be a tremendous conversation about who rhetorically set this off. It's a long, long story. We are not going to get to all of it today. But let's just remind ourselves that two of the people that former President Trump is considering as his running mates, J.D. Vance, a senator from Ohio, Marco Rubio, a senator from Florida, back in 2016 in their own separate ways raised very profound questions about the rhetoric that then candidate Donald Trump was using to try to win the Republican nomination. Those questions have sort of been softened. They no longer question President Trump's rhetoric. They belong to the movement that former President Trump set in motion in 2016 and has carried all the way through. We have the lies about the 2020 election, the Capitol riot, which there was an impeachment trial in the Senate, and several Republicans thought, if not morally or legally, from a political perspective, the president was responsible for that. Plus, you have the resistance movement that started up to President Trump as soon as he was elected in 2016, and very dark Democratic rhetoric about what a Trump presidency either does mean or would mean again in 2024. Everyone will be able to find on social media or in some previous television or cable interview some justification. No, that was the rhetoric that did it, or you went over the line, or you crossed this threshold. Everyone can find something to comfort themselves that they're not to blame. But the atmosphere around former President Trump as a candidate, then as president, now as someone seeking the presidency again, has inflamed both parties in ways unrecognizable to me before Donald Trump became a political actor in this country.
Anthony Salvanto, kind of two questions which may be related. One is on the question of acceptability of political violence or its place in the political atmosphere that you've been covering with your surveys. But then also if you could touch on, or maybe this is the first point, the way in which people see each other when they are in political parties, how that has changed over time from merely being a political opponent to maybe seeing the other as something more evil.
Yeah, well, let me start with that, John, because in some ways the measure of this is what people expect. And we have seen, for context here, increasing numbers of Americans, most recently up to 2/3, who say they think that political violence will increase as a result of our current political climate. Now, the other part of that and how we see each other, we have to be careful to separate out what might be motivations, as Major was just talking about, for violence and what people see as the larger political climate. But having said that, you do see partisans on each side. It's been about half who see each other not merely as political opponents, but rather as enemies, as literally threats to their way of life. And what we're probably going to see in the discussion going forward here is how much attitudes like that then can be impactful on what people do and what people will accept in terms of actions. When I've asked, and to be meta for a second, the fact that a pollster in this day and age has occasion to ask things like this, is violence ever acceptable? Well, the overwhelming majority say no, that it is not. But at the same time, the around 14%, the very small numbers who say in some circumstances it can be, well, that's telling too, because it only takes a few individuals. It only takes a handful to then spiral out, John.
Right. Major, in these kinds of extraordinary political moments, public moments, parties, candidates step into them and they take advantage of them in all kinds of different ways. You can imagine it going either way. What's your sense of how the Trump team, the Republicans, the 4 days in Milwaukee there will cycle this new information into their convention there?
John, I don't think the former president needs to, quote unquote, take advantage of this moment. We heard the folks that Tony DeCopel talked to at the Milwaukee airport saying instantaneously they are more motivated than ever. The Trump movement is about a person, no question about it, but it is about a larger sense of where America is and where America may be going. And having attended more than 100 Trump rallies, I know those who believe in former President Trump. think he is about something that is very close to saving America as they define it. And when he says, I'm standing in the way of opponents of yours who want to get at you and I'm blocking them, they believe that. This moment in Butler, Pennsylvania yesterday, this attempted assassination, they will take deeply personally, not just as a matter of politics, but a matter of how they define what America is and what America can be. And that is something that the former president will not have to rhetorically harness. It will follow him. It will grow here in Milwaukee in intensity. Whether it radiates outside of the Trump movement, we don't know yet. But the former president knows he does not have to do anything. His supporters will see this precisely as he sees it. He can speak their same language, but he does not need to turn up the dial. The dial is already turned up way past 10.
Major Garrett and Anthony Salvanto, thank you so much for that perspective and the reminder that we don't know what we don't know about the shooter and his motivations. House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, the congressman who was shot in 2017, is calling for a cooling down of the incendiary political rhetoric. He'll join us next as our special coverage continues. Welcome back to the CBS News special on the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. I'm John Dickerson in New York. The former president had just started speaking at his rally on Saturday, shortly after 6 p.m. local time, when there was the sound of pops in the air. Trump bent down as Secret Service agents rushed to the stage to cover him with their bodies. Then, a defiant Trump raised his fist to the crowd as he was led away.
If you want to really see something that said, take a look at what happened.
They're going to have to take this step by step, evaluate everything that the advance team and the Secret Service agents on the ground did to see just what went wrong.
This is not cool that Donald Trump just got shot. And these people I'm with, the people that were on this plane, we're here to support that man. And we just got stronger in our determination to do it.
CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland was at Trump's rally when the gunman opened fire. We still don't know if Trump was injured by a gunman's bullet or shards of broken glass. Blood could be seen all around the president's right ear, with trickles of blood on his cheek and near his mouth. It's still not clear how the gunman got so close to the former president. He positioned himself on top of a building about 200 to 300 feet from the stage with a clear shot. President Biden said he is praying for Trump and said there's no place for this kind of violence in America. We must unite as one nation to condemn it. The White House says the president spoke to Trump by phone later in the evening. And here is Scott McFarland. Scott, good morning.
Every hour that goes by, John, there are larger or wider road closures, and more law enforcement seems to be arriving here at this county fairgrounds site in Butler County, Pennsylvania, one county north of Pittsburgh. Here's what we know right now. About 5 or 6 minutes after the former president began speaking at the rally last night, we heard a series of explosions. Trump was seen grabbing the side of his head before he was swarmed by his Secret Service security. In a photograph captured by Doug Mills of the New York Times, you can see a bullet apparently flying right past Trump's head. The FBI has identified the shooter as 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks of nearby Bethel Park, Pennsylvania. He's seen in photos that have circulated at a high school graduation 2 years ago, getting his diploma. Crooks targeted the rally from a shed that was roughly a football field away from where Trump was speaking and was shot. Crooks was killed by a Secret Service sniper. At least one spectator was killed. 2 more were injured, and witnesses reported seeing the gunman and pointing him out to authorities before the shooting began. Trump was whisked off stage by security, checked in at a local hospital before leaving to return to New Jersey. In public remarks last night, President Biden condemned the violence, said that he had spoken to the former president. And as you mentioned, that phone call happened pretty soon after the attack. This morning, Trump posted on social media it was God who prevented the unthinkable from happening, going on to say, "Fear not, but instead remain resilient in the face of wickedness." And he is to speak and attend the Republican National Convention, John, which is getting underway right now in Milwaukee.
Scott McFarland, thank you, Scott. For more reaction, let's bring in senior White House correspondent Weijia Zhang at the White House and senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe, who is in Milwaukee for the Republican National Convention. Good morning to both of you. Weijia, we're hearing the president will be briefed again on the incident this morning. What are you hearing from the White House? What more can you tell us?
Yeah, John, in just a short time, around 10:30, he is expected to receive an updated briefing from his Homeland Security team, along with law enforcement officials. And we are just now learning, John, a White House official telling me that that call between President Biden and former President Donald Trump was, quote, good, short, and respectful. So not much there, but they are confirming that it was a very cordial phone call. Biden landed back in Washington last night just after midnight from Rehoboth Beach, where he was actually set to spend the rest of this weekend. But he rushed back here after making remarks. And you can see in this video that there was a Secret Service agent closely escorting him to his vehicle. And I can tell you that this morning, Secret Service has closed down public access to Pennsylvania Avenue in front of the White House, as well as Lafayette Park right across the street. Now, we don't know yet, John, how this is going to change the president's plans for the upcoming week, but we can tell you that the campaign has suspended all political activity. So pausing all outbound communication and pulling TV ads as quickly as possible. And so this is clearly shaping the president and his view of his role right now. And sources stress that it is the very concern of political threats and violence that has motivated this president to run back in 2020 after the white nationalist rally in Charlottesville, and to run for re-election on January 6th. And we are told that it was President Biden who immediately told his team that he needed to address the nation last night. And we heard those remarks. He was extremely cordial and referred to the former president as Donald, trying to bring down the temperature, John, and focus on the humanity of what's happening.
Thank you very much, Weijia. Ed, the Biden campaign may be on pause, but you're in Milwaukee, where the convention begins tomorrow. There's obviously a lot of focus on President Biden's age and his staying in power. How do you think that issue in a paused campaign that would have been kind of on pause while the Republican convention is going on? I mean, how does this throw the campaign as it existed before yesterday up in the air?
Well, much like the advertising, John, it's in suspension. Just an hour before the former president was shot, the current president was on what was described as an angry defensive Zoom meeting with members of the House Democratic Caucus who were questioning his political chances. It was described by several lawmakers as a really testy exchange, and one that might have prompted more lawmakers to come out last evening or today to call for his ouster. But for now, that conversation is completely suspended, according to several people I've spoken with, although one lawmaker suggested it's suspended only until or unless, quote, the current president has another episode. And to the point about advertising being suspended for now on television and in the digital space, don't be surprised if it begins again shortly after Trump arrives here in Wisconsin. The reason being that while there's a desire to try to take down the temperature, it might be difficult to not be responding at some level to whatever Republicans may say here. So Democrats, once again, stuck in a very precarious position. To what extent do you try to take down the temperature, keep the rhetoric on simmer, and yet also respond to or anticipate whatever might transpire here in Wisconsin in the coming days? We're standing outside the Pfister Hotel in Milwaukee, where Donald Trump was, we were told, supposed to stay when he's here. Unclear if this will be the venue. Part of the security perimeter that we anticipate during the day today, John, will be pushed back even further as the Secret Service and state and local authorities begin expanding the security perimeter around this convention.
Thank you, Ed. Joining us now are CBS News Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent Robert Costa and Face the Nation moderator Margaret Brennan with what they are hearing from their sources. Bob, I'll start with you. What are you hearing from the Trump team? And I note here an email to the Trump team from their senior leaders. In it, it includes a line that says, "Please do not comment publicly on the occurrences of today. We condemn all forms of violence and will not tolerate dangerous rhetoric on social media." What are you hearing, Bob?
At this moment, it's all things go when it comes to the Republican National Convention. There is, of course, a lot of concern, alarm inside of the Trump campaign, inside of the highest ranks of the Republican Party today. But they are planning to, one, move forward with the vice presidential selection in the coming days, and two, begin the convention in Milwaukee on Monday. And they're looking towards that Thursday moment when Trump is scheduled to take the stage as a major moment in this campaign, where Trump will appear, as they are planning to at this moment, to give a major speech accepting the Republican nomination. But there are so many security concerns behind the scenes, looking at the perimeter in Milwaukee, looking at the security of Trump campaign offices across the country.
Margaret, who's on the show, and what questions are on your mind this morning?
John, I think all of our heads are spinning because what has happened in the past few hours has changed our national conversation. We are going to be looking really at the politics of it, but really also just the facts as we learn them, and put this into perspective, John, because we know at this hour the FBI is the lead organization conducting this investigation, but all U.S. intelligence agencies are scouring for any indication of who this 20-year-old Pennsylvania man might have been in contact with prior to 6 p.m. Eastern yesterday when this attack was underway. Was he in contact with anyone overseas? Who was he in contact with here? What was the nature of that contact? Or was there any attempt to radicalize him, for example? I lay this out because we have had repeated warnings from the director of the FBI, Chris Wray, both in public and in private, to lawmakers that really all threat vectors are extremely elevated right now. We are talking about domestic violent extremists, people who've been radicalized here, and in that bucket you can include political violence, state-sponsored terrorism, as well as foreign terrorist organizations. And he has testified they are all at a high level of risk in this country right now. So all mass gatherings were already being scrutinized. And in the wake of the events, you can imagine there is going to be an even higher degree of scrutiny. So we're going to be talking to Tom Cotton, Republican senator from Arkansas, national security-minded senator already, who will be addressing the Republican National Convention about crime and other issues. We're going to have Chris Krebs, our colleague, who has been looking at the radicalization online, the amplification of some of this really damaging political rhetoric, and Jason Crow, a Democrat who was on that call with President Biden yesterday that got heated. Our Ed O'Keefe mentioned it. John, that was the story until 6 p.m. yesterday, and we will pick it back up for you.
Margaret and Bob, thank you very much. Joining us now is the Majority Leader of the U.S. House of Representatives, Republican Congressman Steve Scalise. Congressman Scalise was shot and nearly killed in 2017 by a gunman who opened fire as the Republican congressional baseball game held a practice. Mr. Leader, thank you so much for joining us. I imagine this is very difficult to experience, just hearing that description and these events. What was your reaction when you got word about this?
Well, good morning, John. And yeah, you know, when I saw especially the unedited video with the audio yesterday, you know, it brought back a lot of memories, a lot of emotions. You know, you hear the pops of the shots, and that's a lot of what we sounded like on the ball field in 2017. You know, my first thoughts were prayers for Donald Trump because he went down. We didn't know initially how bad it was. You know, when you heard the word shooter down, that's what they said on the ball field for us. And, you know, and there was a shootout there. With police, Capitol Police, David Bailey and Crystal Griner were heroes that saved me and so many others that day. You saw the heroes yesterday, you know, the police who rushed to President Trump while the shots were being fired. And, you know, and it just shows you the bravery and heroism of those men and women who put their lives on the line to protect other people. They performed quickly yesterday to hopefully save what could have been a much worse situation. And, you know, and our prayers go out for the victim, the dead person who went to a rally, a political rally, and didn't make it home that night, as well as the others who were injured. So, you know, a lot of emotions and thoughts, but clearly, you know, it's one more example that, you know, this hypercharged rhetoric just needs to be dialed down. Let's talk about our differences. We have big differences, but this demonization of Donald Trump as a person that's been going on for years, It has to stop, because all it takes is one person to act on it, like we saw yesterday, for something catastrophic to happen.
As a leader, and with your extraordinary personal experience with this kind of moment, what should a member of Congress, a person in leadership who is in the political space, regardless of their party, what should they say? What should their posture be in this kind of a moment?
Yeah, and I talked to a lot of colleagues yesterday, and, we communicate a lot, text, call each other. When things like this happen, it's a moment where people get angry, and there's surely a lot of anger, but there's also this introspection. What can we do better? And I think, look, clearly we have differences politically. That's not going to change. We don't stop talking about those, but frankly, we ought to get back to just talking about those political differences. And, what are our policies and approaches to improving the economy and improving the lives of people and securing the border and achieving peace in the world? Those should be the front and center issues, not the personality of the person that's going to carry that out. And I think that's the biggest difference. We don't need to demonize somebody else to make our point. And frankly, if you're trying to assassinate the character or the actual person themselves that you disagree with, maybe you've lost the argument. Get back to focusing on the arguments, on the differences that we have, but not the character assassination that we've just become too accustomed to.
Finally, how does that appear in practice? Because we heard in your case, many of similar things were said while you were recovering and everybody was praying for your recovery. How does this happen in practice? Do the speeches at the convention next week and at the Democratic convention need to be tested on a new, against a new standard about whether they take out those personal references or these implicit views about the other side that they are evil? Help me understand how, in concrete terms, your colleagues would follow through on your suggestion.
Yeah, and I think moments like yesterday just kind of refocus everybody, reset everything. In the shooting in 2017, for a long period of time, there did seem to be a dialing down, and hopefully with yesterday we see a dialing down again. And it's got to happen not just with elected officials. Surely it starts there, but with the media also, with late night show hosts. When you turn on a late night show and it's no longer comedy, it's a constant 10-minute barrage against a single person. Those comparisons with Hitler, that kind of stuff, that needs to stop too. I think everybody's got to look in the mirror and say, can we kind of refocus what we like or don't like about what's happening in politics, and maybe not focus it all on an individual?
Congressman Steve Scalise, thank you so much for being with us. Republican Congressman Dan Muser had a front row seat at yesterday's Trump rally in Butler. His eyewitness account of what happened, that's next. The investigation into the shooting at Donald Trump's campaign rally is taking place just as the 2024 Republican National Convention is getting underway tomorrow in Milwaukee. One of the speakers at the convention will be Wisconsin native Reince Priebus, former chairman of the Republican National Committee and former Trump White House chief of staff. Reince, it's good to be with you again in this crazy moment. How have things changed already on the ground there?
Well, certainly people are stunned, grateful that the president, is safe, but also, it's a sad day for the people hurt. And I think it's just a sad day to know that there are people out there that they don't care about their own life. They don't care about other people's lives. And, for the most part, though, the president is strong. He's unwavering. And as chair of the host committee here in Milwaukee, our intention is to move forward as planned.
How do you think things will change at the convention now with this, either structurally, in terms of tone, speeches? Just what's your anticipation, knowing politics as well as you do?
Yeah, well, the events so far that we're actually responsible for are moving forward as planned. As far as the programming, the speeches, how this is going to change, all of that's going to be something the Republican National Committee and the Trump campaign will deal with. So far, though, I think, the president's attitude has been resilient and unwavering, and I expect, just based on my own instinct, not based on what he or anyone else told me, I would expect this convention is going to be epic. It's going to be unified. I think people are going to be even more resolved to work together to move forward, and perhaps more reflective among all of us who talk on television and speak with each other, and maybe that's a good thing, obviously, as well. So I think that there's a lot of emotion going around, John, and a lot of reflection.
When you say reflective, I don't know if you were able to hear Majority Leader Scalise talking about everybody toning down the rhetoric, not just politicians, all of us in the media and all the other people who contribute to this big national conversation. What do you think the nature of the reflection is that you were talking about?
Well, I think it's similar. I mean, I think, unfortunately, division is very profitable in the media today, and I think somehow or another we got to find a way to make unity profitable in America. So it's something I think we've been thinking about for a long time, but we had a tragedy yesterday. I think we just got to reflect on that and pray about that, be thankful for a miracle, but also a tragedy for someone else. So it's just, the whole thing is just horrible and dreadful.
Reince Priebus, former chairman of the Republican National Committee and chair of the host committee for the convention this year. Thanks very much, Reince. Pennsylvania Congressman Dan Muser was sitting in the front row at former President Trump's campaign rally yesterday when those shots were fired. He joins us now to tell us more about what he heard and saw in those terrifying moments. Good morning, Congressman. What went through your head?
Hi, John. Hey, good to be with you. Yeah, it was certainly a tragic day. I heard some of the other comments being made by Leader Scalise and former Chairman Reince Priebus. It was a bad situation. It started as a typical rally, of course. Trump was in great spirits. We gave our opening remarks prior. I was sitting with Mike Kelly, Congressman from Western PA, and as well as Dave McCormick, the U.S. Senate candidate, and we were 5 or 6, 7 minutes into the president's speech when shots rang out. And after the second shot, we knew what was happening, and particularly when I looked at President Trump and saw him grab his side of his head and hit the deck. So a little bit of pandemonium took place. I mean, certainly screams, and people were very upset, a lot of tears. And frankly, when the president stood up and gave his fist that he was okay, that cooled a lot of people. I mean, it was pretty amazing fortitude of the president to be able to have the wherewithal and instincts to do that. So, just shows that he knows how to lead. He knows how to make people feel better in a really trying situation. And frankly, John, I'm glad that the shooter, I mean, look, whether he's insane or mentally disabled, you lose your life. You do something horrible like that, and let's face it, our victims are, he murdered an individual. We got 2 in critical care, which are, sympathies and prayers go out to them and their families. So it was bad scene.
Tell me about the range of conversations you've had, Congressman, either with your colleagues or constituents, as you discuss the fallout from this moment.
Well, quite encouraging and quite perhaps uniting. I've heard from many Republicans, of course, but I also heard from many Democrats. I heard from our governor of Pennsylvania. I heard from House member Chrissy Houlihan, just to name a couple. And they were very sincere, and they really want to do what they can do to help have a better dialogue, a better environment, not just with me, but in general. But I will say, just as Steve Scalise was pointing out a little while ago, and Mike Johnson earlier, I mean, some of the demonizing of President Trump is just, not only is it true, it's virtually hostile. I mean, John, I can sit in committee meetings sometimes, and people refer to the president in the worst sort of terms, and MAGA is worse than a 4-letter word, and referring to him as a tyrant and how he's going to destroy democracy. I can imagine what they say in their stump speeches back home. But there's plenty of blame to go around. We all need to understand that we have a responsibility here to improve the political environment.
Congressman Dan Muser, thank you so much for being with us. Our special coverage continues in a moment when I'll have some final thoughts about the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. Saturday, one of our fellow Americans died because he supported a political candidate. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, all that we seek and is promised in campaigns, stolen. 2 more are critically wounded for the same reason. Former President Donald Trump mercifully dodged a bullet by a distance of inches, maybe less, a distance that now measures the space between whether this reprehensible attack on a candidate and our democratic system will further inflame the political climate or shock us into a retreat from our usual reactions. The usual response would be to sort this tragedy by our partisan reflex of acrimony and fear. But the desire for affirming existing beliefs and fresh attacks is what most would say brought us to this pass. This is not just one more crazy turn in our crazy politics. This is a new moment, a new test. Not to stop thinking or slow the vigorous fight of ideas, but to respond with what we all know has been missing from public debate: restraint, grace, and the instinct to forego an advantage when something larger is at stake. This tragedy has reminded us all of those stakes. That's it for now. Our coverage continues with Margaret Brennan and Face the Nation.